I'm Linda Deir, and I'm going to talk about my near-death experience that I had at 20 months old. At 20 months old, my mother would wake up every day and she'd start screaming and yelling and hitting me and beating me. And I couldn't stop her. I was only 20 months old. I had no leverage with her. And I watched my dog hit the gate, and he'd pop this on the side yard and he'd pop the gate open and off he'd go. So I thought, one morning I decided when I was still in diapers, I took off to the gate and I pushed on it and it opened up and off I went. And I was going to go find my dad because of my mom. Okay. So I ran onto the median of the expressway. It was probably 2 blocks down the road. And I got on the expressway and police officers in Sacramento saw me walking in the median of the expressway and they stopped me and they said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to find my daddy because something is wrong with my mommy." So they put me in their squad car and they asked me to point out how to get back to my house. But after having gone through all that, I wasn't going to do it. So I told them no. Now, this was in the 1950s. It was 1954, to be exact, when this happened. So there was no child protective services. And basically, something like my situation was a family matter. So the police took me to the candy store. I mean, things were done pretty casually in those days. And bribed me with candy so I would show them, point out how to get back to my house. And it worked. So I pointed out, it wasn't far. I mean, I don't know, it wasn't too far to get back to my house. And when they showed up to the front door with me, my mom opened that door. She was so shocked. She was the nicest person I ever met. Nothing like she really was, And she convinced them that, "Oh, thank you for bringing her back," and all that. As soon as they left, and she was sure they were gone, she took me inside and beat me unconscious. She actually killed me, is what she did. I felt so relieved. I went to a place that was just dark, but I was at peace. I knew I was safe. I knew she couldn't hurt me anymore. It was like being in some kind of limbo, some kind of just a safe place where I knew I'd be all right. And she threw a bucket of cold water on me. I mean, I wasn't there watching her do it, but I woke up in a puddle of water, shocked right back into this world. And I couldn't believe I was back here. I went, "Oh no, what am I going to do now?" I was just crying. I'm going, "Oh, please, I can't be here." And in that moment of desperation, I asked out loud for someone to help me. And when I did that, and the key is to ask. This is what I learned from that one urgent moment. When I asked, they showed up all around me, like 10 or 12 of them, as they telepathically communicated to me what I needed to know. Now, I'll explain what this is later. I took this photograph of them when they showed up at Christmas time in 1994. So, what was I? I was 42 when they showed up at this point. And I'll tell you the story about that as we get deeper into this. And they showed up all around me and they just stood there looking down at me, not worried about me at all. As I was on all fours in that puddle of water, still crying, and I settled right down. Once I saw how their energy was, how their vibration was, I wasn't afraid of anything as they started communicating to me about who I was, why I was here, and what I was in for. They told me, they said, "Life will get better for you as you get older, if you can make it through childhood." So evidently, I signed up for a front-loaded, heavy-duty, front-loaded life with all kinds of, I guess, karmic things I needed to go through to understand myself and to perform in the way that I intended to before I came here, when I planned this life with my guides. And then what the takeaway that day was, I mean, they told me a lot of things, but the takeaway that day that just completely released me from fear, from ever being afraid of her again, or ever getting pulled into fear ever again in my life. They communicated to me that, and what came through it, from it, was that this life is not all there is. I knew that and know that so clearly. Having this encounter with them, this communication with them, this telepathic communication, even when you're only 20 months old, even if you're younger, you understand telepathy because that's the universal language. That's the language they use when they speak with each other, when they communicate with each other. I can't call it speak. It's a communication. It's a vibration. It's a mind to mind communication. We all know what it is, but we really do underestimate the fact that we have it, let alone use it. Yeah. So I learned from that how to use it all the time after that encounter with them, and that relief I felt. I'm telling you, I felt a relief that was like something. I will never know the difference between having that experience and not having it. I can only imagine my life would have been filled up with fear like most people, but it hasn't been, which made my whole life different from that point forward. The guides, in my case, I didn't have to keep having these situations where I had a near-death experience, or I had some trauma happen where the guides would come and save me. I didn't have to go through any of that. They were just with me all the time. From that encounter, I learned how this worked. This communication worked from mind to mind, and I trusted it. So that right away made me different from everyone else. I mean, in school, in life, with people, I've been actually kind of a loner because I'm never alone. I have them there all the time. I know what to do, when to do it. I know when to get in something or when to get out of it. I'll share a few things with you about my life as they've assisted me and guided me. In fact, that's the name of my book. I wrote a book. It's called Guided. And that photograph I took of them is on the front cover of that book, rightfully so. I got through that childhood. They warned me that they told me my life would get better as I got older, but then they warned me if I could make it through childhood. And there was a point in time where I just couldn't take her abuse anymore. She abused me all the time. Nobody in the family, nobody who was around us or ever, nobody would point out that something was wrong with my mom. And I mean, it was obvious that something was wrong with her. I never hated her, but I tried to help her. But she was completely turned off. I mean, my mom was so wounded. I still don't really know what happened to her, but she was so wounded all her life. She never recovered from her anger, is what I'd like to say. I'd sum it up as. But throughout my childhood, she was just relentless about tormenting me. I mean, I learned to have eyes on the back of my head. I learned how to, I became so intuitive, and the guides would come through. I'd ask them, things about what was going on and what do I do with this? And they'd come through. They'd always calmly come through, and we'd have these conversations, these telepathic communications. I would literally sit in the sandbox and before school and cry and play and talk to them out loud and have this conversation going with them all the time. I'm telling you, I mastered it. It was really amazing. And it really did save me in my childhood. So if you want to know about how that worked out, the first 7 chapters in my book, 28 chapters, is my childhood. And it's pretty harrowing, but it's also very informative because of what I learned and how I learned it through this connection to these guides that has been with me my entire life. I get out of that childhood. I managed to get out alive. And I mean that. I almost didn't make it. They were right. If I could make it through childhood. And I got out. And when I got out, the first night I was out of that, I got pregnant on purpose to get out of that family, to make sure they'd let me go. I was a disgrace to the family. Thank God. And I got out of it. Married my high school boyfriend. And because of this trauma, that I was in a constant state of trauma, I wasn't afraid of her, but I mean, I was always on edge, nervous, always had to outthink her, always had to be ready for her next assault. It was nonstop. First night I was going to be out of the house, my mom says to me, she goes, "Did you tell him about your problem?" And out of my mouth, and I didn't even know where it came from. I didn't think it. It was the guides talking through me. I said, "I don't have that problem anymore." I wet the bed until I was 16, until I got out of that house. I couldn't help it. I did everything not to do it. I set the alarm. I did everything not to, and I would still have that problem. Imagine that. That's so striking. The next thing that happened to me as soon as I was, and I never had that problem again. The guides were right again. The next thing that happened to me, now I was pregnant, I was 16, is my body started to physically change. I mean, if any of you can remember that movie, The Hulk, where the guy, he starts to get real big and his clothes split open from him getting so big, his body gets big, his clothes all split open. That's exactly what I felt like as soon as I got out. I was hyperventilating. I couldn't catch my breath. What was going on is I had literally held my breath my whole life just to get through it, just to make it through it. And when I got out of there, I was making myself so small so they would leave me alone. I would deflect as much assault as I could by doing these things. I imagined how I could just bring it down to a level where she didn't actually destroy me. So when I got out of that situation, I probably went through this for a couple of weeks where I couldn't stop breathing. And I felt so big. I was expanding. What I was doing is I was expanding. I was able to be who I was. I was able to speak freely. It was amazing. I had held my breath and kept my true self hidden up until that point. And that's what it felt like for me to come out of that. It was remarkable. A couple of years later, my husband and I, we bought our first house. We did it. I had to paint the house. It was a brand new house. And he was working on a framing crew, and he framed the house. So it's called sweat equity. We built our first house, and our down payment was our sweat equity. It was the best house. I had a swimming pool put in, a built-in swimming pool put in before we even moved in. It was crazy. Everything that happened was just, it was amazing. I mean, we were guided to do these things. I mean, I was, okay. And then I turned 19. We were in our new home with our little family, and the guides come through and tell me, Linda, your marriage isn't going to work out. You need to find your own way. So I said, okay, I really liked building this house. I painted it. I helped, my husband and his crew, do whatever I could do. I liked it. I said, okay, I asked my husband at the time to take me to the architect that drew these homes in these subdivisions of homes that he was working on as one of the carpenters. So he did. I mean, he believed in me. He didn't think it was weird. I had no education for any of this. And I certainly didn't have time to go to Cal Poly, or I lived in California at that time, some, well-known college that would have been perfect for me. But I didn't have I didn't have the funds, and I didn't have the support. So I went about it my own way. He introduced me to this architect, and I showed him a plan I had designed on a napkin. He looked at it and he looked at me. He goes, "I don't have time for this." I thanked him. His name was Dave Williams. I said, "Thank you for meeting with me. I appreciate that. And I do understand, I was just a kid. I mean, I was 19 years old. So what happened about a year and a half later, I said to my husband, I want to sell the house. I was guided to do this. I didn't tell him about any of this guidance. I didn't want to scare him. He believed in me. That's all I needed him to do. And I said, I want to sell this house. We had done this again with the same home builder. We did another sweat equity in a nicer home in a neighborhood nearby. And we were already in that house. I said, and we rented the first one. And I was 20. I said, I want to sell the first house, take the money. I found a lot I want to buy, and I want to build, and I had it sketched out. I want to build this house on that lot. He goes, okay. So I sold the house and paid off the lot and built my first house. The architect took me under his wing and put me in a room. And that's the room I worked in whenever I built and designed another house. This turned into a business, is what I mean. It was meant to be. The guides, they told me at 19, the marriage isn't going to work out. I never said a thing to my husband. I really didn't know why. I just moved forward like they told me. Don't overthink anything. By the way, this is how guidance works. You write it down. First of all, whenever you get guidance, write it down, because if you don't write it down, it's like having a dream. You remember the dream, but if you don't write it down, you can't remember it later. So these messages that come through, they're like little one-liners. Life will get better for you as you get older, if you can make it through childhood. They're little one-liners. I've had so many different ones throughout my life. Your marriage isn't going to work out. Find your own way. They're little one-liners like that. Write those down. And my career took off. I became a general contractor, land developer. I mean, it was amazing. I could not miss. Then, about 6.5, 7 years into it, my guides come to me and I'm just going. I've got subdivisions, land development, rental properties I built that I'm keeping, that homes I have that we're living in. I mean, I was just on fire. And by the way, this is the early 70s. Women were not in that business. Women were realtors or they were secretaries. They weren't doing anything like this. I was guided to do every bit of it. I wasn't afraid of any of it. And my husband started his own framing company. He became a general contractor and started his own framing company. And I was the one, I'll interject with this. I was the one that had to go collect the checks on Friday to cover the payroll. We had 30 carpenters. Our payroll was about $30,000 a week in the early 70s. And I had to negotiate the contracts with the general contractors. I mean, they must have been laughing their heads off at me because I was so young, but I was very firm. I said, we have to have that check every Friday to pay our employees, our carpenters. And there is zero tolerance for it not being there. I could never not pay these people. They have to be paid. And I said, you understand that before we sign the contracts? They said, yes. I said, okay. So off we went. My husband was building out these duplexes and single family homes and apartment complexes, big ones. And with our crew, we had the fastest crew in Sacramento at that time. And nobody could touch us. Our bids were lean, but we still made a profit. This one time I came in to pick up the check, and I did all this without any formal education. That's my point. I was guided to move on it. So the guides probably saw that I had some kind of experience with this kind of thing from previous lifetimes. It's the only thing I can imagine. How could I know how to handle all this? Okay, and I was a woman when women were not in the business. I'm telling you, it was out of the box. But I went to the one general contractor to pick up the check on Friday, and the secretary says, "Oh, don't walk in there. He's on the phone." I said, "Okay." She goes, "By the way, he doesn't have your check this week." I said, "Okay." So I sat down, and like always, instead of freaking out, there was no way I could show up to that job site without their checks. No way. So I sat down and in their front office, and I just sat there. I breathed. I just let the guides come to me, and bam, I had it. I saw the light go off. This is the 70s, old phones where you could see the lights on the phone, on the secretary's desk. I was watching the light, and when I saw it go off, I stood up and walked over to his door. She goes, "You can't walk in there." And I walked in there, just calmly. And I walked up to him and I said, "Glenn, listen, I understand that you can't pay us, but I don't think the 30 carpenters are going to understand it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have them go to your house tonight, and you can explain it to them." He got his checkbook out and wrote that check. There's no reason for, getting excited about things or crying. Could you imagine? Or anything, any breakdown. All you do under stress and duress, you breathe, you calm down, and you listen, and that you are always being guided. They are always with you. You are never alone. That's my message to you all. So no matter what happens in your life, I mean it. What's going to really solidify this for any of you is learning to write down what the guidance was. That's how I mastered it. When I was a kid, and I had this information coming through all the time, this conversation going on with my guides all the time. I wrote it. I started writing in my journal at 7 years old because I knew I had to harness this. I had to figure it out. I couldn't just keep talking out loud to my guides. I was in school. They'd think I was crazy. Lock me up. In the 50s, okay? Nobody was getting it in the 50s. Let me tell you, people were not vibrating very high. They'd lock you up for stuff like that. So I learned how to have this conversation with them in my journal writing every day. So I really didn't need anybody's help. I always had help. I knew how to contact them. All I did is I'd open up my notebook, is what it was, and I'd start writing in there about what I was thinking or what just happened or trying to figure something out. And then all of a sudden, something would come through. I'd write it down, like having a dream. I'd write that down, and then I'd look back at what I wrote a day later or so, and I'd go, oh my God, I can see everything now. I can see the whole thing. I can see why that person did that. It's not right what they did, but I can see why they did it. And I can see what's coming next if I don't do this or that. And, I could see how to play out the story. All right. The timeline, whatever you want to call it. I saw what was coming because I could calm down enough to connect with that information. So my life goes on. I'm bouncing a little bit, but my life goes on. They come to me about 6-7 years into the building business where I'm just cooking, They tell me, sell everything. There's going to be a real estate crash. You guys, I was just on fire. I was doing so well. I did not want to hear that. But you know what? I knew they knew. I knew they saw what I couldn't see. And I followed it. At that point, I didn't buy any more land. I finished my projects. They said, finish your projects, sell everything. I got everything sold. It happened about 18 months later when the crash hit, the real estate crash in the late 70s. It was terrible. In fact, the times we're coming into now, they're comparing it to the real estate crash of the 70s, the late 70s. This is what I'm talking about. I sold everything, got out. And people kept asking me, Linda, are you getting out of the business? What are you building next? I mean, they were always watching me because I was an anomaly, I said, there's going to be a real estate crash, so I'm getting out. So that can happen. The train's coming. Get off the tracks, let the train go by, and then go ahead and do what you want after that. But same analogy, And they said, they laughed at me, is what they did. So when that real estate crash came down, 3 months later, after I got everything sold, and I got a divorce at the same time, that's a whole different story. It's in my book. The guy said at 19, your marriage won't work out. They were right. See what I'm saying? And I sold everything. So I was financially okay, which is what they told me to do, find your own way. And I did. And I was okay on my own and got the divorce and everything. And everybody lost everything. It was a mess. It was a real mess. The guides come to me about a year later and they told me, real estate will never be the same for you again. I said, what? I said, why? They said, you got over your anger issues. I thought, wow. Of course I had anger issues. Growing up in a family where I held my breath for 16 years, where I wet the bed until I was 16, I was in constant trauma in that family. And nobody helped me. They saw it and nobody stepped in. Never. All right? So yeah, I had some anger issues and I did work them out. So while I thought I was just, amazing, I could do all these things and make all that money, I thought that's what it was about. That was nice and that was good. That gave me my confidence. But it was really about me solving my anger issues. See, the guides don't look at you like you look at yourself. You look at yourself like, I need to be a success, I never thought like that, by the way. I never thought about making a lot of money. I just did. I didn't expect it. I didn't chase it, is what I'm trying to say. The guides, they look at you as a soul, as you know, the person who came here to heal something, to work something out. And so life is happening while we're busy planning it. That's where that saying comes from. But the guides see, the part where you planned all this before you got here. So anyway, I move on. I start, I'm still in the building business, but it never was the same. It was a struggle. I never liked it after that. Everybody in the business changed. They weren't as good to work with as they used to be. Everything changed so much. In 1994, so that was 1978, 1985, I started taking dream classes. I had a dream. In chapter 1 of Guided, I talk about the merry-go-round dream. And I had this same dream that never changed for 35 years of my life. I had it every night and sometimes multiple times. Never changed. So I thought, I need to look into this. I need to find out what this dream is trying to tell me. And when I went to that dream class, it literally changed my life. I learned how to interpret dreams. I could interpret other people's dreams. I could smell something that was in somebody else's dream or taste it. And when I did that, they'd go, "Oh my God, I forgot that." I mean, I could really hook into their dreams, which is something I do to this day. I help people with that. The dreams freed me. I mean, when I started to realize what that merry-go-round dream was telling me, it was it started out great. I loved the dream, but then everyone started dying in it. And it was, oh God, it was so bad. And when I understood the meaning of it, basically it came down to my purpose in this life is to help people get over their fear. Fear is it's destroying everybody's life. It's what's controlling you. It's what's keeping you from being you, the person who came here, who planned to come here to do something amazing, something specific to you that you were meant to do and help in this world in some way. You really do have an important reason for being here. In my case, general overview. In my case, I didn't have to keep having traumatic events and dying and all this to be with my guides. From that one encounter when my mother killed me, threw that bucket of cold water on me, brought me back into this life. Oh my God, the last place I wanted to be. And I had this encounter with my guides. They have never left me. They've always been right there. I can contact them on command through this lifetime of having that first experience with them where they showed up and it changed everything. I mean, I only realized this I actually always knew it because I knew to cover it up and protect myself from people finding out because I knew it would cause a problem. It would draw the wrong attention to me, especially in the 50s. But I always followed it. I never worried about I never told anybody. So I never had anything to defend. I just did things and people would sit back and go, "Wow, how did you do that? You're not supposed to be able to do that." Here's an example. My two brothers, older and younger, were both raised by my dad to be foundation contractors. That's where you put in the concrete the house sits on, something like that. Anyway, they never taught me any of that. I was a girl. My mom taught me how to cook, clean, and sew. That was it. I wasn't the one that was supposed to be the general contractor and the home builder and the land developer. That wasn't supposed to be me, but it turned out to be me. So when you follow your guidance, you guys, it's just, all I can say is it's the most fun that you'll ever have. It really is. You don't want to miss your life. Having your guides by your side gives you courage. That's what I want to call it. But it's more than courage. It's just learning how to have fun, learning how to enjoy your life and do the things that fill up your heart. Okay. So in 1994, Christmas time, here's the guides. They show up in the room, and I happen to have Film Days 1994, my Nikon camera in hand. And I took their photograph, and there it is. That's on the front cover of my book. And they showed up, and I asked everyone in the room, I snapped the photograph off, because I've seen them since I was a baby. I mean, to me, it didn't freak me out or anything. I've seen him my whole life. And I said to everyone in the room, I go, did you guys see that? And the answer is always the same. See what? At that point, I know, don't talk about it. I got the film back a couple weeks after I got back from the trip. And there it was, right there on top. And the guides come to me a couple of weeks later in a dream. And they told me, you're going to write a book about your relationship with us since you were a little girl. And we appeared so they could believe it. Of course, it's rightfully on the front cover of the book. And 20 years later, I wrote the book. I wasn't ready to write the book at that time because I wasn't ready. I don't know. It's not about doing it at the moment, but I certainly, when I woke up from that dream, I wear a mouthpiece at night so I don't crunch down and hurt my teeth. I woke up from that dream. I sat up and I took the mouthpiece off and threw it across the room. Don't know why I did that. I was like, wow, I'm going to write this book. We were in the middle of, I could go on and on about these stories, you guys. We started the first internet ISP in northern Arizona because they showed it to me a year before it happened. They show me in a dream. They show me these little TVs with information coming out of the sky into these TVs, downloading information into these little TVs. A year later, my husband at the time goes to Comdex. I couldn't go because I was busy with real estate in Sedona. We were living in Sedona, Arizona at that time. And he says to me, the biggest thing going on that's coming out right now is the internet. I'm telling you, I sat back and I got chills all over me. I let him talk. I didn't say anything. We had $50,000 and he kept wanting to buy a house with it in Sedona. I said, no, it's for something else. I don't know what it's for, but we're not spending it on that. And I was in real estate. If anyone who was going to buy the house, it would be me. I said, it's not that. And he talked about this. Within 15 minutes, I said to him, do the research on what it's going to cost to get the modems, to get everything together, to get the admin together, get it all together, and come back and let me know what that's going to cost. $50,000. We went through that. We blew through that money in 1 month. Okay, I've been holding on to that money for like 4 or 5 years. That was it. We started it within 6 months of going live. We were in the black. That means we were making a profit. 3.5 years later, I sold it. And we did very well. And I was guided, once again, I was guided to get in it, and I was guided to get out of it. They told me, I said to my guides, when I got out of real estate in the late 70s, it was 3 months before it crashed. The people that bought my homes, I don't know, like 35 people, I had a lot of houses, they took me to court. We want our money back. The real estate market crashed. She burned us. I didn't burn them. They bought at the wrong time. I didn't burn them. They didn't believe that no one believed the real estate market could crash. They threw all those out of court. But I told my guides at the time, I said, we hit another one of these, get in, get out type of things. Give me more notice to get out. I didn't want to have that happen again. So 18 months after I sold the businesses, there was 2 of them. The .com went .gone. It crashed. You guys, when you're guided, you don't miss these things. You may not want to hear it. I mean, you're making money. You're doing really good. They told you when to get in. But the greed, if you got a greed problem, yikes, that's going to get you. Okay? You got to know when it's time to hold them, fold them, walk away and run. And the guides, when they say that guides don't know timing, that's so wrong. They know timing better than anybody, way better than me. Okay? So it's all about this connection and letting it work for you in your life. Okay? I mean, they're with you all the time. There's no doubt about that. I've lived my whole life. I had 0 formal education for any of the things I've done. Becoming a home builder and an architect and a land developer, no formal education, guidance. Starting an ISP, absolutely no formal education about that. No, absolutely none, but guidance. and moving on the guidance when it comes through. Don't just sit back and go, oh yeah, I'll get around to it. I even told my husband at the time, he looked at me when I said, we're going for it. He says to me, I don't want to work that hard. I said, what? You know what, you guys, when you're guided, it doesn't feel like work. It is so fascinating. All right. It's not work. Oh yeah, it's work. You've got to do the work, but it doesn't feel like work. Because you've got the edge. You know that they've got your back. All right. So I'm going to stop there. I mean, if you want to know more about all this, one thing I want to bring up, I've got a website, and at the top of my website, the feature of my website, which will help you understand all these things I'm telling you, what you need to overcome, what you need to refine within yourself, is the guided journey. At the top of every page and post on my website, it says guided journey. Start here. And you guys, it took me 8 years to build this out with the guides. It's a co-creation with the guides, where they're talking to you about, about course correcting, basically, and understanding what's really going on in your life, your personal life and your professional life. And just go check it out, because it's free. I spent 8 years building this. I asked my guides, you'll love this. I said, so what are we going to charge for it? We're all done, ready to launch it. They said, there will be no barrier to entry. This will be free to everyone. And Linda, you will be rewarded in other ways. I was like, oh my God. Okay, so expect anything. And it is working out. It's working out better than I thought, with all the help I do with people and the work I do. So you guys, write it down. I mean, if I have to say it again and again, write it down, whatever comes through. You're not alone. You're always getting guided. You're always getting guidance. I'm not the only one. I needed it. That 20 months old, let me tell you, I needed it, but I'm not the only one. It's for all of us. We didn't come here to fend for ourselves. We have help. We really do have that help.